So today we've got a guest that I've been looking forward to for quite a long time as we had him booked all the way back in January. Dr. Michael Gervais. He is one of the world's top high performance psychologists and a leading expert on the relationship between the mind and human performance. Dr. Gervais has spent his career being called on by the best across the worlds of business, sports, the arts, and science when they need to achieve the extraordinary. Dr. Gervais is also the founder and the host of one of my favorite podcasts, the Finding Mastery podcast. He's the co-creator of the Performance Science Institute at USC, and his work has been featured on all the major networks like NBC, ABC, Fox, CNN, ESPN, etc. He's also the author of a book that I really enjoyed last year, which was The First Rule of Mastery, a USA Today bestseller, and an audiobook I recommend on Audible called Compete to Create with Pete Carroll. In our 2 episodes with Dr. Michael Gervais, we are really going to focus more so on coaches and the coaches as performers than athletes. In our first episode, we're going to unpack culture, leadership development, and the psychological skills we need to develop as leaders and how to do so. In our second episode, we'll be unpacking what makes a great mentor or coach, how we can coach others better by asking great questions, and he's going to give us coaches a mental training plan that we can also share with our athletes. Dr. Michael Gervais is a real role model of mine, not just because he is a great coach of leaders, but because of how he lives his life as a husband of over 30 years and a father. I know you will all find today's episode interesting, valuable, and actually incredibly challenging. Welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast. My name is JP Nurbin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Betsy Butterick. Nate Sanderson sat this interview out. Our mission on the podcast is simple. We just want to help you as a coach become a better leader and build a better team culture. If you're interested in learning more about our work as leadership coaches and facilitators, or if you want to explore some of our online resources and books, head on over to tocculture.com and betsybutterick.com. While you're at tocculture.com, don't forget to subscribe to our weekly newsletter. It's packed with notes from each podcast episode. These next 2 episodes are going to have a lot of notes. It's also every Thursday you get our latest article, which includes some practical culture building tips. If you really are enjoying this podcast and you want more, I would encourage you to also check out the Culture Builders podcast. It's a podcast I've had for years, and I've recently restarted it here, and there's typically 4 or 5 episodes a week, very short, 2 to 3 minutes typically, just giving you more tips on how to build your culture. Dr. Michael Gervais, thank you so much for making the time to be on the podcast here. I want to get you started with this question. You know, culture has become a bit of a buzzword. There's a lot of attention around people wanting to build culture, organizational culture, team culture. And yet I'm wondering how you see the relationship between personal development of the leader and cultural development. Like, what's the relationship between those 2 things?
First, thank you for including me in the conversation and hosting me. I'm excited to be here with you. And so I love your question. It's a complicated question. And I think there's probably a very simple answer, which is there's an intimate connection between the 2. But it's complicated because of how I understand it. So let me just take a little bit of time and open it up. I think first and foremost, I struggle with understanding what another person's definition of culture is. And so I think that first and foremost, there's a calibration that needs to happen. Like, what is culture? What does that word mean to you? And then right underneath that is like, well, what's the spirit of the culture that you're wanting to create? And each team and each organization has a little bit of a different way that they want to go about the feeling of being on that team or in that organization. And so I need to understand that. And then there's a whole bunch of work to do to get that almost like so clear that you could feel and see the fabric of what you're trying to build. That is hard to do. You can put words on walls. Like in 1980, we all had these fancy words on walls, and like it doesn't mean anything. It's something else. And I don't want I'm happy to give my definition of culture, but I don't want to um, impose that now because I do want to answer your question as best as I can. The relationship between the leader and the culture that is established or establishing. First and foremost, cultures are co-created. So it's not one person holds the keys to the culture. It is all of us that do it together. And we give to the culture, we give to our teammates, we give to relationships what we have. We can't give what we don't have. So if we say in our most calm, intellectually curious vibe, if you will, if we say, I want a culture that is word A, word B, and word C, fun, I don't know, whatever, competitive, whatever it might be. But I'm very anxious, intolerant, and frustrated as soon as I get stressed. I'm going to give intolerance, frustration, da da da, when I'm stressed. So culture is made at the moment of stress. That's when we know what culture really is. And so if we can, again, let me go take 2 steps back. We can have these fancy words, and then during calm moments, we can be close to those words. That's totally cool. But as soon as we find ourselves in rough waters, when Mother Nature gives us something difficult to navigate and super challenging, we reveal what we're really made of. And when it comes to culture, when the leader acts differently under stress, they're saying, um, this is how I really am. And if the culture is not strong enough, the leader determines what that culture is. If the culture is really strong, they can absorb that odd behavior, that lower performance kind of state, if you will, the inconsistency of behaviors, and support the leader in that, in the way that's aspirational for the culture. So there's a lot there. I'm sure that I muddied the water a little bit more than maybe you had hoped, but I'll stop talking and see where you guys want to take it.
And I love, when there's like a way to kind of simplify the message. And I think you nailed it there when you said like culture is created under stress. And yes, we can have all these words on the wall, we can have all these aspirations, but what is the lived experience of the people that are co-creating that environment together? And my question for you would be, I often hear from coaches, especially assistant coaches, some version of, well, I don't want to bring that up or have that conversation because I'm afraid of rocking the boat, or I don't want to rock the boat. And sometimes I find myself responding, your aversion to rocking the boat is actually unintentionally sinking the ship. So can you talk a little bit about, if culture is created under stress, when people are afraid to bring something up or rock the boat, what advice would you have for the importance of understanding, or maybe shifting perspective around the value add those conversations can have for strengthening a culture?
Yeah, and as you're saying it, I know you're sharing back the word I chose about created under stress. It's actually revealed is probably a more accurate word. It's revealed under stress. Okay, so all right, I think that where we might find some fertile ground here is that when there is an alignment that is really valuable, is to find those attributions or north stars or bellwethers. I'm using a bunch of different words to describe what we want the culture to be. Doing that in the harbor is really it's good work now. I'm not saying don't do that work. And and then creating the psychological mental skills so that somebody can be great when we're at rough seas. Okay. And then recalibrating with everyone. Sometimes it's real time. We call it hot washing, real time during intense moments or periods, post game, pre game, post meeting, post pitch, whatever, pre or post. And then sometimes there's more of a more thoughtful, deliberate debrief. Okay, so you come up with a couple words that matter to you, and then you train the mental skills so that under high stress, we can be about those words, those principles, rather than fall to what mom and dad give us, because that's really what we're all kind of sorting out in our adult lives, the stuff that we were programmed very early on. And God love my parents, but they were not high performance psychologists. Like they did their very best. Um, and so So the tension required, high performers deeply regard the tension that is required to find our very best together. It's not an avoidance. It's sometimes, in most of the times, it's very inconvenient to address something and to bring something to the surface. And true masters, and just underneath masters of craft or mastery of self, is high performance. Just to think about like an ordering, high performers and true masters of craft radically look for those moments of tension, because they know that that's where the deep work is. It's the broth for the deep work. And so it's inconvenient, it's difficult for most people unless they hold this absolute kind of power. And then there's no emotional vulnerability if the coach, let's say, isn't part of it, but they're just yielding the whatever the financials or the who's on the team, who's not, and they're not really vulnerable as part of it. But my experience with high performing teams, everybody's in, meaning that
Mm.
you might have some job security, but if you don't keep it going long enough, like you too, are at the prey of the owner, or not the prey, but the perils of the owner. So yeah, tension is hard. Hard conversations are hard for a reason. There's a lot of emotions involved in them. And this is where, when you do the early work up front about valuing vulnerability and creating the space that, I'm going to use a word that at one time made me a bit nauseous, safe space. And now I'm thinking about safe spaces in a different way. It's safe to be honest, safe to speak truth to power, safe, not safe from tension, but safe to tension. And that takes a lot of work to do that, to value vulnerability in a way that honors the definition of vulnerability. So vulnerability is when I make something that's very special to me, um, I put it at risk in your hands. So when I was I don't know, 9-year-old, and my favorite bicycle, I put it at risk that you were going to take it and ride with it and bring it back, whatever. And now it's more about what I'm putting at risk is my time, my heart, my money, and I'm making those at risk to another person. And I will not do that unless I have some sense that they're going to take that stuff seriously. And that just takes time. If I give time, heart, money to somebody callously and like flippantly and like that, there's plenty of wolves out in this world. And I think that is a very dangerous proposition to um, give trust without knowing if it's safe to give it. And there's obviously two approaches to trust. Trust is given, trust is earned. And I'm definitely on the side that it needs to be earned.
Mm. There's a few things I really want to unpack there that you shared. I mean, you're talking around, I know you use that word high performance, high performance psychologist. I mean, I think probably a few years ago, you might have referred yourself as a sports psychologist. And I think when people think about sports psychology, they're usually thinking about people that work with the athletes. But what I love about your work is you've talked around how you do so much work with the leaders, the coaches, the heads of these organizations. You're working with not even just the top athletes, but the people that are working with the top athletes on a daily basis. And so when you think about high performance leaders, high performance coaches that you've been around, that you've worked with, and you talk about these psychological skills they need to build, what are those key psychological skills that they build? And what does that training look like, right? Like any skill building is going to require some training, right? It's going to require some of it's going to be, kind of in a vacuum, right? And then some of it's going to be actually in the field, right? In the field of battle.
So, okay, I love the question. And at the end of the question, I'll try to bridge culture with these skills. Okay, so
Okay,
let's start
sweet.
with the basic skills. And
Yeah.
as an applied scientist, I'm not interested in something that doesn't hold up in both environments, the laboratory and on the frontier in high heat, high stress, pressure packed environments. It's got to hold up in both of those. So at Finding Mastery, which is the performance consulting agency that I'm part of, we built a 5-factor model. And the 5 factors are self-discovery. So there's a whole process to better understand who you are. What is the vision of a compelling future? What are your first principles? Can you articulate your purpose? And. So there's a self-discovery process. That's the first. The second is there are very clear mental skills that you can train. Just like you train your physical body, you can train these mental skills. It's kind of sets and reps, if you will. So deep focus, being calm, confident, those are a handful of the big ones that we would train. Then there's the third component, the third factor, if you will, which is psychological frameworks. So developing your psychological framework. Are you optimistic or pessimistic? Do you approach success or avoid failure? Do you see things as an opportunity or a threat? Have you mastered, or are you mastering, the ability to control what's in your control? Have you a deep framework to understand how to live with passion in any environment, not just the ones that are, easy? Like, I love playing the guitar, but I also need to have passion in other parts of my life as well. So understanding how to do that with a sense of resilience, which that's a placeholder. Passion, perseverance are placeholders for the word grit. And then there's a whole set of recovery practices. Those are also skills that you can build. And it's the basic ones everyone knows, but it's just making sure that they hold a seat at the table of high performance. And then the last is the concept of mindfulness. So mindfulness is the golden thread that runs through everything. It is a skill, it is a state of being, and over time, it is an enduring trait. And mindfulness is the practice of being a bit more aware so that you can live in the present moment more often. And the present moment is where all the psychological skills are trained and expressed. And it's where everything amazing takes place. So it is foundational for us as well. So those are the 5 factors: self-discovery, mindset skills, psychological framework, recovery, and mindfulness.
And I have a question on the mindfulness, right? So I'm a big meditator myself. Listen to many of your meditations, share them with other people out there. It's something that I've built up over the last 7, 8
Fun.
years of my life. And when I try to bring this into the world of coaching and sports, oftentimes the pushback I'll get from coaches is, I tried that, it doesn't work for me. I know that many of those people are listening, to this episode right now. And then there's others that might say, well, I have that. It's, I go walk my dog and, to clear my head. When you think about mindfulness, and you said that's a golden thread that runs through it all, outside of meditation, are there other ways, or is meditation really one of the key practices that all coaches should be exploring and trying to build into their repertoire?
There was a time that coaches, and I've learned so much from coaches, sport coaches. I've learned so much from them. There was a time when they used to say, not that long ago, you can't teach speed now. We were all wrong about that. All of us were wrong about that. He's born with hops. Actually, there's a whole science that will say otherwise. He's got it. She's just got it. The X factor. Wait, what does that mean? Oh, she or he knows how to be in the present moment, how to adjust eloquently. No, that's a skill too. So I think the reservation of, let's call it psychology first, before we go to mindfulness. Mindfulness is necessary, not sufficient. So mindfulness would fall inside of this world of looking at the internal world. Okay, so let me just pause for a minute and talk about psychology. Psychology is the study of oneself. Can you imagine passing the test of life, passing any test without studying? No. Like, for the most part, we need to study. If it's really a hard test, we need to study. So how can, coach, I'm going to speak right to you. If you're on the fence about this psychology mumbo jumbo, yeah, there's weird people out there. There are people that have introduced psychology to you in a way that you didn't like. There are professionals that you didn't vibe with, that you had a different philosophical position. Totally cool. But there is no passage to the path of mastery without the study of self and the development of psychological skills. There is none. Because as you get better at physical skills, you can do more. But you can only do as much as your mind will allow you to meet a demanding moment. So what a coach killer is, and you know this, coach, is that what they can do it in practice but can't do it on the field. okay, or can't do it on game day. It's a coach killer because they look great when they don't have pressure in their own mind. So all of the psychology stuff is the study of self so that you can have an honest conversation with yourself on what you need to get better at. Mindfulness is a way to increase awareness, period. So increasing awareness, there's 3 ways to increase awareness. Mindfulness and meditation are in all 11 world religions. The practice is established about 2,600 years ago. Think about that, coach. 2,600 years. Okay. And in the working laboratories over the last 20 years, the research is incredible. So I'd love to have a conversation with you, coach, about, you know, um, some of the ancient traditions and why they found benefit there, the modern science, and do you want to have a conversation about special operators in the military? We found that when those that practice meditation perform better in high consequential environments, or do you want to talk about, there's a million other things that research around emotional regulation, research around deeper concentration. Deep concentration is the entry into flow state. Is that a pathway that you want to talk about, coach? So part of it is on our shoulders to be able to have conversations with people that it feels as though we're talking the same language. And I have to do that. I have to understand the philosophy of the coach, the culture the coach wants to create, and the interest points to have the conversation. So, um, and then there's the experience of, let's call it, meditating. So meditating, there's 2 basic types of meditation, and there's thousands of forms of it. And the way that somebody meets that moment of meditation, I'll tell you, I was a fidgety, cynic, skeptic when I was first introduced to meditation in 1999. And I was like, this is not for me. This is weird. Like I'm a doer, and I want to get into dangerous environments and figure it out. And that was the whole culture of action sports. And what do you mean we're going to sit on a pillow and you're going to like say, breathe in and now breathe out? Get out of here. And so I was not, I couldn't do it. And then when I had, it actually wasn't a choice. It was in graduate school, and the dean of the school was a Vietnam vet, came back really screwed up in his own words, and found this practice. And he was like, we're doing it. I don't care what, listen, you can take a nap for the first 15 minutes of class. So he was a professor of mine, and we meditated at the beginning of every class for I don't know, 7 to 15 minutes. And he's like, you can take a nap. I was like, I'm not doing this. And he's like, take a nap then. Do whatever you want. And then eventually over time, I was like, well, let me just kind of go with it and see what this mumbo jumbo is about. It's fucking awesome. It's just so good. It is so good. So what are the 2 basic types? Contemplative, go on a adventure and observe and answer some questions and, kind of follow those threads. And, like that's one. And then the other is single point, where you're just relentlessly, uncommonly returning back to the one thing that you set out to focus on. Could be a breath, could be a mantra, could be anything. And that is one of 3. So if you're not meditating because you can't quite find the right way into it, okay, no problem. What are the other 2? Conversations with people of wisdom. So sitting with somebody who is of wisdom, who has reference points that are radically different and deeper and compelling, to you. Like there's a lot that comes from those conversations, because they'll hold a mirror up to you. They'll look at you ways like, did you just say that? They'll kind of laugh when you're talking at the surface and nonsense. They'll do whatever their vibe is to take you deeper, because the best of the best of the best are speaking, whether it's in the spiritual practices or in adventure, big wave surfing, or it's in stick and ball sports, or it's in entrepreneurship, where you've got cold air across your skin, whatever the art or science or craft is, the half percenters are speaking the same language. And so maybe you need a conversation with people where it's consistent enough to give you that deep insight to make sense of you and the world around you just a little bit better. So what what those conversations do is they force you to be in the moment, to get to an insight, to get to wisdom. What meditation does, it's a practice. There's no forcing function. There's a practice to be in the present moment, to get to an insight. What's an insight? Oh, that's how this, that's how this works. And if you get enough insights, you get down into wisdom. Now, the third is a forcing function, which is journaling. So you can lie to yourself. It's hard. It's not, I don't know. It's just kind of lame. But so when you got a pad of paper out and you start writing some stuff, like you got to kind of be honest, and that's hard to do. And it's not for everybody. I am not a journaler. I do like to write, but I'm not a journaler. And I love conversations with people of wisdom because they hold up a mirror and get right down to it, and it's a forcing function. And then the other one is meditation. It's hard. It's hard work. And then I'll give you one more. I'm going to put an asterisk next to this one because I don't want to be sued. Environments that are incredibly dangerous are a forcing function to be fully present, but they're not a forcing function to get to wisdom, insight and wisdom. So they will force you when you do something that is truly dangerous. You must be all in, or you pay the ultimate consequence. There's an asterisk next to that one only because it doesn't get to the deep insight, really, in the most desirable way, I would say. But it is a forcing function to get present. So there's a long narrative there, and I hope I didn't take us too far off pace.
I feel like you've taken us just far enough that now JP and I have to fight over who gets to ask the next question and how many, because I know that there's so many for each of us. And as you're talking, I'm making all these different associations. I love that you said inconvenient when we're talking about difficult conversations, because I think that's often one of the biggest barriers for people actually having the conversation is it's wildly inconvenient given the context. You talk about training speed and having hops, and I think about wearing jump soles when I was a kid to try to increase my vertical. I'm still learning how to be passionate about changing diapers for our little one. Like, I'm not there yet, but I fully understand the value of doing all things passionately.
To your best,
questions.
to your best,
Thank you.
let's be, I'm not
Yeah.
either. I did not want to
Okay.
wake up and change diapers. I was not motivated at all to do it, but I was committed. So I made a fundamental commitment to be the best dad I can. And that means when it's inconvenient, still stepping up. And so motivation is fleeting, and there's only 4 toggles to play with motivation, but commitment is enduring. And commitment is this ability to back what you say, even when it's hard. You are not motivated, but you are committed towards something. And it has a totally different feel to it. So I love that you picked that up, Betsy.
Yeah. So, because I want to give JP back the space that I know so much want to share with you. I think about that quote that says, we teach that which we most need to learn. And I'm curious, with everything that you teach regarding high performance, regarding mindfulness, regarding psychology, what is it that you are still most in need of learning?
I'm a really intense person. And so I need to, this is the year of play for me. I'll explain that in a minute. I need to be more like a panda. So the panda bear has no natural predators, and they roll around, flap around, have a great time. They're big, they're badasses. They can do whatever they want in the world. And I need more of that. So I'm so attracted, early in my career, I was so attracted to people that were as obsessed as I was in an unhealthy way. I don't need more of that. That is actually part of the requisite is that somebody is fully committed to do something very special with their unique talents and the time that they have on this spinning rock. However, I don't want to do it with people that don't have a value of joy and magic and fun and the effervescent kind of spirit of doing hard things together. So that part is, what I'm looking for more. And I just got back from Paris, working with a team an Olympic team. It was a women's beach volleyball team. It was the Canadian women's beach volleyball team. And I was fortunate to work with Marcio Ciccoli, the head coach, with Misty May and Carrie Walsh, who won 3 gold medals and a bronze. So we had a bunch of time together that the output was magical. Like podium at every games is really difficult to do. And he's a very special coach. The Canadian team podiumed at this in the Paris Games. Again, magical and special. But what he brings to my life and to the team is just about every conversation. Now, he's heralded as the best volleyball, beach volleyball coach on the planet. And just about every conversation we have, his eyes well up. And he's Brazilian. He was born Brazilian. And he makes me so much better, because when he's feeling everything and working to put words to it, it forces me to like be in my body in a different way. And I want to be partnered with those types of people. And that's what I need more of.
Thank you.
There's a few things, just phrases that, I just want to double click on real quick. The one you just said recently is just to be in my body more, right? That's a phrase that a lot of coaches are like, oh, what's he talking about there, right? We actually had Amanda Blake on the podcast talking about somatic intelligence, and she does some amazing work around that. But I was just curious, when you mean be in my body, what do you mean by that?
One of the things that we talk about when I work with great athletes, it's like, I'll tell 2 stories here. I was working with the Seattle Seahawks, the NFL American football team, and we won a Super Bowl. And then the next year we got back to the Super Bowl, which was very hard to do. And then we lost in dramatic fashion on the half-yard line with just a couple seconds to go. So we got to win in a dramatic way and lose in a dramatic way. And I think at this point, we're all better for that experience. It's so much easier to win. It's so much more fun. It's much harder to go through a loss, if you will, because our brain can't tell the difference between loss of a loved one and loss of a game, loss of a future that we're hoping for. And so it's that same type of grief process, but it doesn't make sense because it's just a game. But it's called complicated grief. Okay, where was I going? Is that be in your body. So the head coach of that team, Coach Carroll, we built a business together. And it was taking best practices of sports psychology and culture building and bringing them into enterprise organizations. And that's essentially the business that Finding Mastery is today. And as I was going, he and I were going to do a keynote, and this was one of our first ones. And we had done a lot of work and the sport team together. Now we're in a different uniform, right? We're in like a button-up type shirt as opposed to like sweatpants. And there's, I don't know, maybe like 4,000 people in the audience. There's that familiar buzz. And I leaned over to him and I said, "You ready?" And they're doing like the big flashbang video that's coming on before we get out and the music's cranking. And he goes, "I feel it." And I go, "Yeah, me too." And he leans back over to me, and this is kind of in the hallway that's stark and cold behind the stage and this huge kind of lighting system. And he, right before I'm about to go out, he says, "Give him your heart." And I thought, and I said, "Yep, like that's exactly the note." And so parallel that insight with this other thing that we would do for athletes is right before athletes go out, they're trying to prime themselves to be in what we call an ideal competitive mindset. So they put themselves in the best way where their mind and body are connected to go out and be their very best. And what we would say to coaches, what I would say to coaches and athletes before those moments, I'd say, "Hey, go out there and open up all your senses." And that was a shorthand for be in your body. So be in your body is this esoteric. Well, what does that mean? Go open up all of your senses, because that the sensory part of our humanness allows us to get information, like smell some stuff, feel the wind and the sun, feel the rain, hear, like open up all of your senses rather than just thinking about what you need to go do. Like the thinking athlete, there's a time and place for it, for sure, even in the heat of a moment. But if you can open up your senses first, I feel like it's the right counterbalance to be in your body, to get the information in so that you can do something either automatic with it, or if you got a problem solved, that you're more likely to get accurate information rather than, imaginary information. So that's what it feels like for me. It's like, give them your heart is for folks that are like doing something that's not physical. And then for people that are doing something very physical, it's easier, I think, to think about opening up your senses. And so those are two ways to think about it, maybe.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you clearing that up for the listeners there. That's really special. All right, that's it for part one of our conversation with Dr. Michael Gervais. I think he really gave us a lot of valuable information. Yes, it's important for us to lay a foundation for a culture, but culture is really established and built under stress. And yet as coaches, once we get into this stress of the season, we often turn into our worst selves. We don't rise to be our best selves. Thus, we have to develop the psychological skills to be able to be at our best in the storms of our season. I remember that quote. It's from the Navy SEALs, which is, we don't rise to the level of our goals. We dropped or sink to the level of our training. And here we go. Dr. Michael Gervais really talking about how do we train the mental skills, that awareness and that ability to be able to shift. We train that through journaling, meditation, and conversations with people of wisdom. As Gervais said, the 1.5%ers, the really special performers, they are doing these things. These are practices for them. These are 3 things that Shaka Smart recently spoke about on the Coaching Culture podcast. So if you missed that one, be sure to go back and listen. But most importantly, if you haven't started 1, 2, or 3 of these things, journaling, meditation, or conversations with people of wisdom, like intentional conversations, I really hope you don't delay. Thanks for listening in to the Coaching Culture podcast. Yes, we really appreciate you leaving us a review to boost our podcast rating. That's always nice, but what we really appreciate is the most is you sharing these episodes with your athletes, your friends in coaching, and other leaders, and use them as conversation starters. So please do share, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss another episode.